I was listening earlier on News at Prime to Professor Adam Habib, who has resigned as a VC. I think he has done pretty well as the VC there. But let's take a listen at what he had to say about the state of our politics right now, vis-a-vis what is happening at various universities, particularly when it comes to student activism. You would recall he wrote a book precisely outlining his own views about how his interaction, particularly with student leadership, went. You would recall also yesterday we had the SRC president around the table who had something to say about how VCs, as well as the higher education ministry, have to be viewed by the student body. Let's take a look.
Do worry about this, because what has been learned in South Africa by a whole new generation of people, they learn the politics from people like Julius Malema and Jacob Zuma. And so they think you say one thing in public and you say another thing in private. Yeah. And the danger about that is that our politics then lack integrity. And frankly, that's what worries me. Our politics truly lacks integrity. If you speak to South African the public, they have a very low opinion of politicians, in part because they think these people lack integrity. If we want to fix our society, if we want to fix our public institutions, we need to bring back integrity into politics. And I think that's this important thing.
Yeah. Interesting take there by Habib. And of course, it's in the backdrop of what happened in Parliament and what's been happening throughout the last couple of years. With every single day, we have to deal with the lack of integrity of politicians. But earlier on, and I was debating this with Timo Tlatlan as she was stepping off set about what else Habib had to say. He had to say that he is not comfortable, right, with the way that students are organized, right, that they are organized too much along party political lines. And he made a reference to Harvard, to say in Harvard, students are not organized this way, etc. We always used to say during our student days, when we saw universities at sites of struggle, so in fact springboards to overtopple what was the apartheid state at that point, that universities are a microcosm of our society. In other words, right, if we want to fix universities, we have to worry about fixing society. Let's take a look at this.
You don't want, JJ, to operate in an environment that is in a knowledge-based economy, and you operate like an illiterate. Because the system that is here, and it was created, we have now, as black people, adapted to it. We have enough knowledge. We can use the pillars of legislation and regulation to amass our own control into it. Now, the fact that, I mean, you can't deny that ANC is a government. And its governance in our country needs to be informed by their own interest of wanting to see change. So don't change the framework, win the battles. If you're saying it's a colonial system, now that you are sitting over it, use it to your own advantage. Because, I mean, where people are starving, now you're going to start with the process where you would end up in a Zimbabwe situation, instead of making sure that the system that exists benefits your people tomorrow, not the other day.
Apologies for that clip. I'm going to deal with it slightly later. I wanted to complete my thoughts on what Habib said. So the university is a microcosm of society, right? It's not even a big word when you say microcosm. It's a reflection of society. So in society, people organize themselves according to either civil society movement. So you have on a campus something like a student Christian movement that reflects churches outside. An Anglican church, they have a student body called Anglican Society. A Catholic church at a relevant body, Methodist, and so on. And then you have political student organizations such as South African Students Congress that reflects an ANC type ideological orientation, PASMA reflecting passwords. I frankly don't think you can change that overnight if society is still organized that way. Whether or not it's correct for society to be organized, it's a different matter altogether. I do think that in some point it may be useful to have some sprinkling of independent voices that are not beholden to political parties. But to really think you can model the way students are organized on a campus with Harvard, it's ahistorical. In this country, If you look at, even in the 70s, where Stephen Biko and them formed SASO, it was a reflection of the politics of the country. It was an isolated thing where people just were bored and they decided that students are going to be organized along political lines. So I think Habib there is overreaching. The reality is the issue of integrity cannot be resolved by dissolving political parties on campus or student political parties. The issue about whether the national leadership like your EFF and so on reflect their battles of a national stage on a campus is neither here nor there. The ANC in its day, the UDF of which Habib was part, etc., saw students as a necessary vehicle of struggle, of building an intelligentsia, building people who are understanding, who have an ideological understanding that they can then take into society when they leave universities. You prepare them there. You can't isolate them. This reminds me of my school. I always have very good things to say about my high school, Toho High School out in Macau. But it was a cocoon, man. We had something called the prefect system, where I was a deputy head boy, and we had this overinflated ego about being in charge. And when you go to university, we found there's something called SRC, and we said, what the hell? It was too late. It was like we've been living in a cocoon. So I'm hearing, and I hope I'm wrong, that Habib wants universities to be what we used to call ivory towers, where everything is so sanitized. There are no political people fighting with each other. They're just living in harmony, and there are all these independent people who are going to be student leaders. That's nonsense. Truly nonsense. What you need is that students, even as leaders of SASCO, PASMA, they need to be introduced to how things are done in the real world. And part of it is integrity. Part of it is governance. Can an SRC member just go out of the council and do his own thing? If they can do that, next time they're in parliament, they will go and misbehave there, because that's the culture that's been created. And it is unfair to paint all student organizations in the same brush. There are many SRCs that are very organized. When they take a position, when they engage management, they do so respectfully. And not all SRCs are encouraging their students to ban things. We had leaders here yesterday who condemned violence or in terms of the students and how students conduct their struggles. And so we need to be able to give credit where it's due, to say there are some student leaders who in fact have their heads in the right places. Also, what's critical is that students cannot be dictated to by management how to struggle and how to pursue their own ideological aspirations and how they should represent their constituents. Because management will always err on the side of conservatism. Now, here I'm not talking about them, they must be destructive and so on, but their strategies cannot be dictated in a book by Adam Habib. I think that he's losing it there a little, and part of the trouble, even in his own book, was to just besmirch and paint student leaders with one brush. There are many people here, including the president and others, who were shaped by being student leaders at universities. And so they learned the trade, the tools of the trade there, and today they are able to rise and lead business, lead civil society, lead in government. So it's important that we nurture that leadership. If we need to do practical courses and interventions at university, we need to do that, because these people are not there operating in 1976 where the order of the day was just ban everything, just destroy. No, they have to sit on council and read documents of council and understand them and make necessary inputs. And so I know I'm carried away on that. That's not what I want to talk about. I want to talk about the role of business, because tonight there's Business Tuesday. We're going to be focusing on one thing. With a limited time, I want to be able to say one or two things. One, that if a country the country's economy is literally dying, because if it's not growing, it is dying. It's growing at 0%. I mean, it's a scandal and an indictment on the leadership of business in that country, because they are supposed to be able to have business to flourish, even despite a terrible government and framework. Right? And I know that there's always a discussion about, government must create the environment and so on. But we know that they have already failed. So what are you going to do? Are you going to fold your business and go? Are you going to continue with your investment strike? Are you going to just throw your hands in the air? No. Business must be able to take a lot more responsibility about how, on issues where government is not needed, they are going to ensure that there is an investment climate in this country, there is an investment drive and investment appetite by their counterparts elsewhere to attract direct foreign investments and so on. Because there's really no excuse. Their constant refrain about policy uncertainty and so on is getting tired. The reality is you can't go and you know, as they say, have your cake and eat it. So you go around the world saying, you know, South Africa has a sophisticated banking industry. We're number one in this or that of governance. And then you come back home and you have an investment strike and then start blaming government. But when you're out there receiving accolades about how sophisticated the banking industry is, or by the way, while doing that, devaluing the rand and doing all sorts of conspiracies that are now coming to light, it's simply not, we can no longer excuse government. Sorry, excuse business. The second thing that, again, has got nothing to do with business, but has got to do, sorry, nothing to do with government, but has to do with business attitude towards change and transformation and inclusivity. You know, business loves to talk about inclusive growth and what have you. But what are the numbers telling us? The JSE is owned by a tiny percentage of black people. You know, if it's not 3%, we hear maybe it's 22%, all of it's still a scandal. After 26 years of freedom, you got business that is still lily-white in white hands, etc., not sharing the wealth of this country. You look at the numbers of employment equity, it's a scandal. How can you, after 26 years, still have businesses that have lily-white management, lily-white boards, lily-white owners? It's a scandal. And the business always escapes this criticism. You know, when we talk about talk in hushed tones, as a report, as we speak, as late as last year, talking about the fact that 70% of all promotions, 70% of all new appointments in companies, some of them listed companies, are to white people. They're pretending as if 1994 never happened. They're conducting themselves as if there's no affirmative action, there's no employment equity, there's no BEE for that matter. That's the kind of business sector we have. And it's not because I don't like business. It's about the numbers. They don't lie. Those numbers are telling you that the attitude of business is to say, oh, it's not our problem, you know, that all these people were denied opportunity. It's not our problem. And then you got a situation where there's no transformation, and therefore there is no inclusive sharing of the wealth of this country. As Shibikotu was saying, a revolution is brewing. We're on a ticking time bomb. And the sooner all of us realize the role we must play to change that situation, the better.